Like when you talk to guests, to kind of bring that sort of shared sense, like, oh yeah, this has this experience to it, and even though it maybe secretly you're talking about a person, but it's actually the wine that you're sharing about. It's a way to connect with people on a much broader sense, because so few guests, right, are really like experts in wine, and so few guests actually, I think, want to sit there and hear you talk about your technical knowledge and how you know every AOC and what grapes are allowed and whatever, and that's all, like I said, like wonderful. I don't poo-poo that. I just think like in a hospitality and in a restaurant and dynamic, when you're trying to create a relationship with the people that you're serving and you're talking with, you want to have that sort of just, these are like fingers of like relationship. It's like leaving these little like whispers out there so people can kind of connect on to different things that they relate to and they can feel, and I think that's really beautiful, and I think that's really articulate, and I think it's you know, it's quite gracious as a way to talk about something that's, you know, a little bit older and has a lot to it, but it also articulates the subtlety of it. So nobody's looking, you know, it's too easy. You know, people who read like wine scores and wine magazines sometimes think that every good wine has to be like leathery tobacco that hits you over the head and it's got 98 points and it's a big thing. And that I know you all confront that really often. And I think to confront that with like a great deal of respect for someone who's shown an interest in wine and really cares, right? And they're reading these magazines and they think that's the thing to do. But to take all of that and show them that there's equal amount of grace in this sort of subtlety and in the sort of expression that they can feel by looking just slightly deeper. I think that makes a huge impact on a guest. I think that makes them remember you. I think that makes them trust you. I think that makes them want to like take your recommendation the next time they come in, and it builds a much stronger and more powerful relationship. So I think we're going to switch over to red. And there's so many guests that come in that look for recommendations but are very open, and they're smart and they know some things about wine. And it was just so powerful to have wine as an extension of hospitality, as like a hospitality tool. And it was almost like it's like blank artistic like canvas, right? It's like it's this open form of dialogue where the language is not set in stone. There's not a manuscript. There's not an instruction booklet that says this is how you're supposed to interact with guests on wine, period. It's a really open thing, and because people are so complex and interesting, you can use your intuitive skills, which you all have, to sort of understand, oh, this is the person in front of me, and you start talking to them, asking them questions and hearing them, and trying to sort of find those things that you understand about your wine list and the different wines on the list, to create some connections with them and to create the recommendation for, oh, you might love this wine because this does this interesting thing that you're kind of like into already as a guest, as you get to know them. And it speaks to them as a guest very personally and very specifically. It's also sort of neutral, where it's not like you're asking them to come over their house and feed their child, but it allows you sort of into their inner world in a really strong way, but also in a really safe way. So it's like both respectful and super intimate at the same time. So it's a super powerful tool. I would say, don't overlook wine as a tremendous way. Even if you have sometimes guests can be. Some guests are more difficult to connect with than others, and I found some of the guests that are, most challenging to connect with. Sometimes the language of wine could really be the alleyway to get to them, to connect with them. So it allows them to talk and feel, and you let them feel vulnerable, you let them feel comfortable, and you compliment that, and you show them that you understand them by bringing them a wine that sort of suits the kind of dialogue that you have with them, that suits their interest in the way that they're talking about things. And I think that those are all things that definitely happen as wine ages, as it experiences some oxygen over time, and it's living and breathing, it's taking in oxygen, it's changing, it's sort of like molecular structure or whatever, it's evolving because it's a living, breathing thing, and it's sort of putting out this different kind of expression. But if you think about nuts and cheese, right, like it's a different experience. You have that, and when you're in a different mood than when you have like green apples and pears and you're sort of like fresh, kind of, it's a different experience entirely. But yeah, I think those are fantastic interpretations for sure. And definitely, even though it didn't have any oak, it absolutely can sometimes emulate some. That's partly why people use oak, because it's a porous material that, and I'm sure Jared touched on the various different types of oak, right? And some are more porous, some have tighter grains, some have looser grains, some have different kind of flavors. Sometimes they say that it imparts, but the primary mechanism of oak in great wine is not to add a distinctive flavor, but it's to add this microscopic amount of like oxygen and air in this slow and methodic interaction. So it can sort of evolve at different rates and different levels. And that one is entirely in tank, but it's in tank, so it's surrounded by its own juice in a large vessel for 30 months before it's released. Whereas the other one is like 6 months in tank before it goes into the bottle and then is here. So the next wine is from Bordeaux. I thought Bordeaux would be good to do. Not certain if everyone has Bordeaux on your list. I think majority, everyone for the most part does. But Bordeaux is important just because of the world stage and the amount of historical acclaim and the amount of, it can be like largely a reference point in the greater world of wine to understand aging and to understand great wines. And just personally, I feel like Bordeaux is particularly seductive as it gets older. And I think when it's younger, it has less definition and less character. Again, I'd love for you to take your time and taste and smell and kind of create your own sort of intimate dialogue with each glass. And if you write it down, that's great. I always wrote things down. I like to write things down and I never read them again, but always the process of writing for some reason helps it stick in my brain. But however it works for you is really the best. But one of the things about Bordeaux is because it is primarily made from Cabernet and Merlot and Cab Franc, is that these are bigger grapes with more skin to juice, and so there's more tannin, there's more complexity. The skins have a lot of these like phenols, the things that kind of make it colorful and aromatic and things like that. So there can be a lot congested into the wine. And so I think about Bordeaux in the sense of like when it's young, it's like it's like a weightlifter or something at like this young age, and there's like they have all these muscles, they don't know what to do with it, they're almost awkward. There's like punching holes through walls for no reason. It's just like they have all this strength and you're like, dude, it's awkward. Or like this young person, like, you've all met this person, maybe you are some of them, is like the young person who's really bright, really smart, really clever, and it's like they can't stop themselves from correcting everyone in the room, or like talking over people, or just like shouting out the answer for no reason. You're laughing, you know what I'm saying. This is a real thing, but this is kind of like Bordeaux. It's like, it can be really kind of tightly wound and have like a lot of like, a lot going on, a lot to say. But it's a little unbalanced, right? It's kind of like sometimes it's like too much here and too much there. And that's why when you think about age and you think about vintages and you think about things like that, it's not always like, sometimes the greatest wines in the world are actually just not that good when they're young, because they're so awkward. They're in such an awkward stage of infancy that they're like, oh, all fruit and all flash over here, but then there's no, like, it hasn't quite come around to be this harmonious creature. And great wines have this harmonious completeness that allow you to participate in the experience. They don't hit you over the head and dominate you. They don't just take over and like say like, nope, I'm at the table, nobody else is allowed to be here. Like those tend to be more unbalanced wines. Balance allows everyone to participate, and it's more of an inclusive, communal kind of vibe. So particularly with Bordeaux, I think this is a poignant thing. This is a thing that comes through really true. And so whether you sell it or not or whatever, I think it's a good proxy for the greater world of red wine, because they sort of speak in the same language. And so with the younger one, sometimes there's more oak that you feel. There's more tightness, there's more tensity, it's more astringent, right? It could be more like bitter, one-dimensional in some ways. And it's not until it has a chance to like see the world, experience some pain, as she suggested, I knew her name, and like know that, wait, I don't always have to come screaming out of the glass. I can hold myself back and give a more subtle and more nuanced and more layered experience. And hopefully when you get to the older vintage, you kind of see how some of those intensity moments have relaxed and kind of melted into something maybe a bit more broad and a bit more accepting, a bit more open, a bit more comforting. But in general, when we're in talking about aged wine, if you have a guest, right, that comes in and they're just looking at the list in a whole, and they're saying, oh, I don't know if I should get this younger wine or older wine, and they want you to speak specifically to that in this quick little thing, and it's really hard to do. Just say, like, what's the difference between older wine or younger wine? I think finding your own sort of way to explain that sometimes when they're young, they're kind of like, they're like ready to party and put lipstick on and go out, and then when they're older, sometimes they're gonna like maybe allow more space and more conversation, and maybe everyone gets to be a part of it and requires a little bit more deep interaction, because sometimes maybe guests aren't there to focus on the wine. I mean, as much as we love them too, right? Like, you want them to have a pleasurable experience, but it might not be all about the wine. Sometimes they want to just get something and go. And I mean, older wine a lot of times is something that requires a bit more time and attention and patience and engagement. There's all these different types of chemical components that are in wine naturally that interact, and there's some kind of magical process when they have a chance to connect with each other and disconnect, and they connect and they form different types of molecules. They form different smells. I mean, when you smell something, you're basically on a molecular level smelling the shape of the molecule. So you know, like bananas smell like this, like it's like an L shape with a thing on the bottom, right? Like there's a shape to the smell of things, and those molecules change over time. Certainly, I learned a lot of this actually from Maggie Campbell from Privateer. She talks, and she's super bright and went to school and like is really well educated on this, and just sort of like different parts of the distillation actually have a different shape to the molecules that are in there. And wine, similarly, as it evolves and connects and bonds in different ways, and certainly a large tank can do it much differently than in a bottle, can sometimes come up with a variety of different aromatic expressions and textural complexities that otherwise they wouldn't come to.